Hello everybody, this is Christian from Blue vs. Orange TCG, coming back to you with another deck profile from the August Titan 1 Open event this past August. And with me today is the runner-up for that event, Mr. Richard Wyatt. Would you like to say hello to the audience there, Richard?
Hello.
Yes, and he came second place in the tournament with 4-wide Orion packs Off-Road Patrol. Is that a good way to put it, Richard?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, the deck list on Teletran, which I'll give you the link. You can put it in the description. Was called OPORP, like overpowered. It's a play on words. I have a penchant for play on words, even when they're bad. So.
That sounds about right. All right then. So why don't we jump into the deck profile here real quick, and you can talk through your lineup that you ran with.
Sure. Well, so to be honest with you, the lineup was actually something that I arrived on for the Full Con event the month before this Open, and I was excited to try this same four wide, and also could make decent use of supporting fire. The lineup proved way more powerful over the course of that tournament than I was actually anticipating, but supporting fire looked really bad in my 4-wide list, believe it or not, which is not something I was really expecting. But I decided that when the month turned over, I wanted to try a similar lineup in T1, supporting fires, play some of the cards that were actually impressive to me, and make some quick changes. So the deck, in all honesty, does one thing really poorly, which is you don't use your flip economy very well. Pax literally can't flip until he arises, and none of the other want to because they want stealth. Save Power Train once these two guys have been KO'd. So you're most of the time actively not flipping any of your characters, which if you're prone to forgetting that as a part of your turn anyway, it's a great lineup for you. But past that, you do get a lot of utility out of attacking. You have a bunch of different attack orders available to you based on like the sculpting of your hand, and you're a great going second deck. I know that a lot of events, not just in the ATP era, but in the pre-ATP era of tournaments, were decided a lot by die roll, is the truth of the matter. And this deck, my goals of building this was to build a deck that was better going second than going first. And the truth of the matter is that due to the fact that you basically get to force your opponent into your character that you want them to attack by building a Brave ability into Orion packs over here, since all of your other characters have stealth. You can force their first weak attack into Pax. He's sturdy enough that he probably won't get KO'd in their first attack, and then you can swing him in again, force them into him for a second time, and you can functionally trade 0 attacks for 2, because once he arises, he'll flip and untap. So you can be up to 4 characters, and your opponent will be down 2 characters. So that was like the main functionality behind building this, and then also Power Train's stratagem granting Off-Road Patrol just like relevant stat lines, and himself included, and having a built-in draw 2 cards to pair with the Arise trigger from Pax drawing 2 cards meant that you didn't have to play any cards that actually said draw cards on them if you didn't want to, due to the fact that you kind of, in most matchups, natively had a draw 4 stapled to your characters. I hope it didn't ramble too much.
No, not at all. Honestly, I wanted to ask a little bit more questions about the lineup itself, because I think the lineup is really interesting, because I think it does a lot of things that we haven't seen in the game a whole lot before previously, right? So I think like you said, it's a naturally going second base deck, but you could argue a lot of like the patrol decks pre-ATP were pretty okay with going second as well. I think we saw probably another really good going second deck that this deck seems to take a lot of inspiration from is like the Fangry 5-wide ASP aggro deck, where you had your Fangry, right? Except this time I often saw that deck as like Fangry either going first, as being like one of the first textures if it went first, and sometimes going second, and having that last bigger character kind of last out through a lot of it, and having this Kreb, having Kreb come out at the end and having an extra character on the wheel turn. You see this, but it's a little bit of a different facet, right? Having the character that come out be better than what kind of comes in first out of the Fangry, right? Like it's hard. it's easy to say that Fangry is better than Orion Pax, right? But Optimus Prime's way better than Kreb will ever be.
Yeah.
It's also
Yes.
it's also a really interesting deck because it's also something that's almost like an anti-meta strategy, given that Powertrain, I think, and his stratagem, Down But Not Out, is inherently a really anti-meta based card, going against Legend, just Legend decks in general, combiners, even though Menasor wasn't a consideration for T1 like it was in Full Con, which is maybe safe to say something that you maybe considered for going to Full Con. In your finals match against Superion, did you ever consider that the on combine draw 2 trigger a Powertrain was ever gonna come into play at all?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I picked this, was because I actually thought Superion was maybe a good choice for the event, given how orange the metagame turned out in the full con of it before it. So I was kind of expecting another orange metagame to come up in this monthly event, so I went, okay, well, if you're gonna play orange, 4 wide beats 3 wide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you get an untap on Pax, that's 5 wide. 5 wide beats 4 wide, typically speaking. Those aren't hard and fast rules, but they oftentimes will do something to that effect. So I played the stratagem not just because I thought it would be a great anti-meta call against the Legend Mode characters, and it wouldn't be a complete loss against the combiners if Superion showed up, but also because I was trying to get the best bang for buck in terms of attackers. So this first line of text was actually probably the second most relevant. I think the least relevant line of text was probably you get bonus stats battling Legend Mode characters on your opponent's side of the field. But just the fact that like Powertrain becomes a 4 bold 1 with the stratagem, or High Jump becomes a 4 bold 1 with the stratagem in the Anthem ability from Powertrain, or Tote finally becoming into his own and being a 3 bold 1 with the stratagem and Powertrain's ability.
Games.
Those were kind of like the largest choices behind it. Yeah, I know, right? Tote's almost a character, almost. I will say this, I had Tote live on 1 health during this event an absolutely staggering number of times, because I would throw him out early as like a low consequence attack, and my opponent would be conservative with their resources and try to spend nothing and kill Tote. If I ever flipped a blue, a lot of the times that was enough to just save him from dying to the attack in 1 shot, at which point he now had to eat an out of combat resource from my opponent, something like the damage from a Valiant effort, or something from a Camion crash, which wouldn't get the full value. Anytime I did that, the deck felt so good. One of the truths there is, I mentioned this is a going second deck, but it's not quite as rote of a play pattern as you might otherwise expect. Over the course of the tournament, I attacked, and I believe so correctly, on my first attack with Orion Pax, High Jump, and Tote in different matchups. The only person who never goes out first is Powertrain.
Interesting.
So.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well,
yeah. I mean, expand on it if you wanted to, but if we want to move on to the battle card stuff, I understand that too.
Yep, I was gonna say we can probably move on to the battle cards right now, and I might save some questions near the end for like the overall deck. So let's see the battle cards.
Sure. All right, we're gonna start upgrades, and we'll go weapons first. For an orange deck, I'm actually playing a pretty staggeringly low number of weapons. I'm just playing 8. Which feels like not very many, but I promise that we will make up for it in the actions part of things when that comes through. So we're playing kind of your standard, I'm an orange deck, right? So this deck is an orange deck, you have characters with an 8 bold on them, you have characters with high base attack, so you're trying to push damage. We're playing 3 grenade launchers. Now our next weapon that's the most important is Harpoon Gun. It is important for 2 reasons. One, Orion Pax, after he flips an Arise to go to Optimus Prime, becomes a leader, which is relevant for the 3rd line of text on a Harpoon Gun, which would make the card functionally a +2 bold 1 pierce 1 weapon on him. And Powertrain is also a leader, so he also gets the +2 bold 1 pierce 1 effect. And then when this goes on one of your smaller guys, just to be a slight uptick in damage, it's still a relevant card. It's not a total loss if you're upgrade flooded in your hand and you're kind of just like profuse with weapons. But the other thing to note is that we're trying to play as many Autobot cards in this list as possible for the Legend Mode side ability of Optimus Prime, who when he battles, if you flip an Autobot card, he gets +1/+1 till end of turn, right? So of these 8 weapons, 4 of them are cards, the 3 Harpoon Guns and the Noble's Blaster. So functionally, when Optimus flips a Noble's Blaster on defense, it's a blue functionally for him. If he flips it on offense, it's an orange-blue for him functionally. If he flips Harpoon Gun on defense, it's an orange-blue for him, or it's an orange attack. So you kind of like turn these Autobot cards into double pip cards for Optimus when you're back. Noble's Blaster is there because it's a green weapon that's an Autobot card. Just kind of does the bare minimum of everything you want most of the time. The worst card is Paralyzer Blocks. If I were to do the event again, this would not have been in the deck. It would have been cut. It was a lot of my matchups that I played against were they were X-black decks, right? So they had orange black where they had a bunch of like Camion Crashes and Sturdy Javelins and stuff in them, or Absorb Horrors where it was hard to recall the top card of my opponent's deck, or they were blue black decks where they had random double pip cards in there as well. And so this got cut in almost every match I played in the entire tournament. Had I played a mirror match, it would have been an incredible card because it's just a +4 in this deck that's playing an absolutely staggering number of total orange pips. But this is maybe a card that's better relegated to the sideboard than the main board, and you probably don't need more than 1 in your entire 50, if I'm gonna be honest with you.
What was the original like
and that kind of
point for playing the Paralyzo box exactly? Like when you were playing that, was it just because you needed that extra white and green weapon versus say like a Noble Blaster or lock-on lasers?
Oh, it was literally because the weapon count is so low in the deck.
Okay.
The weapon count is incredibly low in the deck, so every green weapon that was reasonable that we could put in the deck was one that we were trying to do, and Paralyzo Box was the last card in, and it's going to be the first card out on the next iteration of things.
Sure.
But the only character who can pick it up is Orion packs. All the off-road patrols are melee, so this green pip is functionally not there for anyone who's not Orion packs Optimus Prime. So, yeah, if you're looking at my list, do not play Paralyzo Box. Be something else in its place. Even a second Noble's Blaster would probably be better. Now we'll move on to the armors. Now, I mentioned that there were not a lot of weapons. There are an absolutely staggering number of armors in this deck list based on what people have normally thought. So we're playing 3 improvised shields, 3 trithelium shields, force fields, and 2 bashing shields. Now this is only 8, right? In terms of total number, this is only 8. But given how bad armors are generally in the metagame, this is a ton of armors. Now improvised shield kind of doesn't count, right? Because we're playing it not because it's an armor, but because of the orange that are on it. It's just like the first card into an aggro deck that's not grenade launcher. In this day and age, you know, like with the death of peace through tyranny, you know, may it forever rot in hell. It's just the most efficient card to flip, and you are able to get value out of the tough one if you need to play an armor on, say, your Orion pack. You can get multiple value pieces out of that by playing this on Orion packs, giving yourself on and give your chance to one more chance to hit an Autobot card on defense and some more resilience. On top of the fact that you are playing Armored Assault, which we'll get to in the actions portion, so you can functionally have it turn into a bold one on that turn as well. We're playing Shield, which is not a card people see in 3 almost ever in this game. I think you're famous for playing a couple in your Galaxy Prime things of that sort, Christian, but we're playing 3 in this list because it is an armor that is orange pipped and an Autobot card. You'll notice that as the justification for a lot of cards in this list. But yeah, that's really it. I was also expecting a pretty high number of Decepticons in this event, and just being a +2 armor is pretty dang good. The truth of the matter of things. 2 bashing shields
of Decepticons, real quick. Did you end up playing against? I played against 2 matches that were not Decepticons through my 5 rounds of Swiss and 3 rounds of top 8. I played against I guess that's not true. I played against 3 Autobot decks out of my 8 rounds.
playing against 3 Autobot, 5 Decepticons, and this card was great in the Decepticon matchups, save the really focused Pierce ones. Then I actually think we'll talk about Bashing Shield last. One, the most boring, and two, the reason I'm playing 2 of it. I know you see a lot of people went down to 1 copy of Bashing Shield, or maybe none in the main. But I think that it was a card that's rising in stock again because I think Force Field is coming back into its own. Force Field was a card that was unbelievably impressive for me all tournament long, even against the blue decks. There was not a matchup where it was bad. And I have enough reasonable armors existing elsewhere that people are tempted to use their Bashing Shield on things that aren't Force Field. If they don't, then I do just get to like hang down with +1 defense on my characters who are 4 wide and reasonable health otherwise. But if they use it on this early, then their Bashing Shield equity is done. It's stressed. They don't have that many answers to Force Field, and when Force comes down, it can just be back-breaking. Especially when you pair it with kind of the stealth shenanigans I'm already running with my lineup. The third one of these in the sideboard, and there's an argument that you can maybe play the third one of these in the main board. And then Bashing Shield is here to answer opposing force fields. That's literally it. Like, it's not there to answer anything else. We'll take out other things where it makes sense, but it's there for force field.
So there's a lot to talk about with the armors, I think. So I think
Sure.
I think the armor count for Orange decks has gotten increasingly so interesting in the past few months. I think even in like the Junkion events, I think lost my train of thought there, but yeah, you've seen like the Junkion deck list, right? Like in these 4-wide orange deck lists, they look so similar to this, except for, you know, maybe instead of Trithelium Shields, obviously they'd be Scrapper Gauntlets. Just, you know, there's something weird about like Force Field coming back, Bashing Shield coming back to 2, mainly for orange decks that want to run Force Field. Even you just playing, like, people have been playing Scrapper Gauntlets in orange decks a whole lot more these days. Trithelium Shield, like as a one of usually in decks, is pretty common to see. It's staggering to me to just see like the sheer amount of armors that orange decks want to be running these days. What do you think? What do you think's kind of caused that, right? Because I think I have like a general idea for that. Overall,
It's one card. I think it's Armored Assault. It's Armored Assault from ATP3.
Card's good. Yeah, card's very good.
Card is
that was my
really
main
good.
reason.
It's the main reason for that. The second one is that Force Field is kind of this such a high roll card. Like where it's good, incredible.
Yeah.
Because what it actually reads is that if your opponent doesn't answer this, oftentimes you will literally just take an extra turn that you didn't have otherwise.
Exactly.
And that is huge. Armored Assault being kicked from a static +2 static +2 plus a bold 1 is huge game. It's functionally way better than Supercharge because the diminishing returns from white pips in your deck are much smaller on it, right? If Supercharge on average in an orange deck is +3, we'll call it +3.1 or something like that.
Sure.
But the sigma, right? Like so, like the margin of error on that number is way higher. I've played Supercharges and hit for +1 on my attack flips more than once. Whereas if you look at Armored Assault, the floor is so much higher. In that case, the floor is 2, right? And so if you can get an additional +1 on your attack out of the thing, being a +3 90% of the time and being a +2 80% of the time, like you're increasing your consistency functionally by building your deck in a way that enables that card. And I think static buffs are just on the rise. There's a lot of really solid static buffs, and you'll see that in the action portion of my deck as well. And we'll get to that as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I was gonna say Armored Assault as well. That card's super phenomenal, right? Because it, just to kind of piggyback off what we said about like Supercharged versus Armored Assault, right? Like a great experiment to do. And this will show it, right? Like take any orange deck that you have put together, right? And if there's Supercharges in there, have like a little static board, just have 1 Supercharge and flip 5 cards, 2 for the base and then +3 for Supercharge, and do that 10 times, and then record how much attack one character gets off of that, like every single time. Then do the same for Armored Assaults with a Bashing Shield on it, right? It's going to be higher on average most of the time. And in a tournament setting where you're playing matches over the course of, you know, multiple different rounds, you want that consistency, right? And so I think, and honestly, like, because Armored Assault gives that plus, that plus one bold is like such a low, it adds the like the power level of wanting to play an armor for the turn for an orange deck just so much more, right? Because you don't have to use you don't have to use the reckless charge to try to get a little extra damage push in there as that static base. You know, there's also like a rise in meaty orange decks. You know, these like 3 wide, medium, tall orange decks, right? So things like the Wreckers, Rodimus Prime 3 wide decks, Dinobots. You know, Dinobots love Armored Assault. There's just so much like, you know, you've heard of like Big Boy Blue. Well, it's like, you know, it's like football team orange, just as all of a sudden kind of an archetype.
Medium chunky boys orange.
Yeah, which is such a contrast to like Bugs, ASP, normal 5-wide offer patrol, all these decks, right? Even like Quake, even like the guys, like that was kind of like one of like the weird like in between where like you start off with like the chunky medium guys, and then you go to like the tiny dudes, the fragile guys. But these decks where they don't do that, they just constantly remain tough to kill. Is another reason why you're going to see a lot more armors. Like, I think an ASP deck isn't going to run this many. Well, that's not true. ASP probably runs this many armors because of 3 Bashing Shield and 3 Emphasized Shield already.
Yeah, run 3.
Yeah, but overall, I think, you know, you're gonna see this a whole lot more, not outside of Junkion and Fulcon and T1 for orange decks. I'm happy about it.
Say this too. So one of the other things that like building your deck in a way that enables a Bashing Shield is you get to kind of hedge your bets a lot more. So one of the things that like the balls to the wall aggressive strategies don't really have access to is a thing to do when things go wrong, which is why blue decks have historically kind of enabled them if they're at a similar width, right? Is because blue decks are all about contingency plans, right? So their plan A may not be as good as the orange deck's plan A, but their plans B, C, D, E, and F are better than every plan the orange plan has. One of the other things that building your deck to enable Armored Assault does is it grants you this ability to hedge your bets, right? So you get to decide whether or not it's more important to KO your opponent's character or to save yours, and being able to have that flexibility in your game plan to keep your opponent off balance. That's awesome. That's a really important ability to have. I think Armored Assault already encourages you to build your deck in a way that affords you that agency, and the power of that agency is something I think a lot of people don't understand when they're putting the cards together. They have to get them in their hands and put them in play. They realize that, oh, this is a really good facet to have as part of my game plan. So, I think that's a hidden knob in the card.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree 100% with that. Why don't we see the utilities?
We move on to utilities. Yeah. There's actually a decent number of utilities. So there's only 3. Pardon me. There's only 3 Autobot armors here. So that brings our total Autobot card right now count to 7. So I don't know if you want to have like a ticker in the bottom, or I don't know if you can even do that, but
I'll have to. You know, I could try. I could try.
All right. So 5 utilities. Not a whole ton of them. But the ones that are here are massively impactful. We mentioned earlier that Harpoon Gun's biggest piece was that Optimus became a leader and Powertrain starts a leader. That's even more the truth on Matrix Leadership. The truth of the matter is that any of these utilities is really good on Powertrain or Optimus, and that being the case, you have a lot of flexibility in your game plan. I will say that I KO'd a character with the damage from Absorption Core being overwritten by one of these other 4 utilities an absolutely staggering number of times in the event. It had to happen 4 times, which is just a lot.
That's so many.
To be 1 little damage, and for me to... Yeah, I know, for me to only have 5 utilities. Nice. But it happened a ton of times. So Spy Satellite Uplink was a card I was not playing in my main board in the event, and I was absolutely wrong, and it lost me matches to do so. So I added to the main board, and it won me matches, and I'm so ecstatic that it was in my main board. The only matchup I cut this against in the entire tournament was Superion in the finals. Because because their Brave character is out of the mode where he has Brave.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, keep that in mind. And then Absorption Core, so because of the high armor count, your armor slot is going to be full more than your utility slot is, so that's why we're playing Absorption Core over Holomatter Projector, plus Holomatter is more vulnerable to Bashing Shield. Although Absorption Core is more vulnerable to Magnetic Dysfunction Ray, because all my team is Autobots, and so if you didn't know how that works, that means one Magnetic Dysfunction Ray pops the entire Absorption Core, which will go on it for the replacement effect. And that is a massive bummer, and did happen once. It's all right. It's fine. You take those; they're not wins, but and in Matrix of Leadership, we mentioned Optimus' ability earlier, turning oranges into functionally dual-pipped cards. It turns dual-pipped Autobot cards into tri-pipped cards, and that gets absurd. So that's really the reason for these being here. These could have no printed text on them and be orange-blue Autobot cards with no name, and we would play them.
You didn't find them too clunky at all?
Because of Optimus' ability.
The 3 Matrix?
No, not in this deck. Not in this. You actually are playing a pretty high number of greens. There's two Bash builds. There's the Absorption Core, the Spy Satellite Uplink, Paralyzo Box, Noble's Blaster. And how many green actions? Am I playing any green actions? No green actions, but let's do like 8 green pips. So if you just understand that you're almost always going to be taking a Matrix of Leadership or an Improvised Shield, then you're totally fine. One of the other things to note is that this deck is a really, really good Confidence deck, which we'll get to shortly. But Confidence allowing you to filter cards out of your hand because you have a plethora of cards is a key piece of why this strategy is so good.
For sure. Makes sense. Yeah, the utilities, Spy Satellite Uplink and Absorption Core especially are going to be, or have already seen like staple plays in every deck. Orange, blue, mixed, like those cards just see so much play these days, and it doesn't shock me at all that they're going to be in the main board for you. Why don't we move on to the actions side of things for your deck now that we've seen all the upgrades?
Let's do it. Before we go, Autobot card counter, 3 more, up to 10.
Up to 10, here we go.
Alright, so we're going to start with the 3 of actions first. These are kind of things that are core to your strategy. They're ones you want to see every game, multiples if you can. So there's 3 cards we have 3 copies of. We've got 3 Confidence, 3 Show of Mastery, and 3 Armored Assault. Now, you and I talked ad nauseum, great portion of this video, about why Armored Assault was good. And this deck is built for Armored Assault relevant. The ability for you to play a defensive play and then kind of take a half measure with Armored Assault being a plus functionally 3 on your character is fantastic.
Yeah.
And the old one pairs with double orange pips or Optimus' ability to find Autobot cards to be functionally even bigger is actually awesome as well.
Absolutely.
So Confidence. The reason that Confidence is in here is, one, this is a orange to Autobot action. That is enormous. That is so big for us.
That's 13 Autobot cards.
And that's 13 Autobot cards. Cue the ticker. So Confidence says draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards from your hand. If you have all Autobots in your starting, which we do, you get to play another action if you want to. Now, you probably weren't keeping track of how many upgrades we revealed in the first part of things, but there are 23 upgrades in this deck. Maybe it's not 23. Maybe I got it down, but it's something in the neighborhood of like 23. 21, I think. It's 21. My bad. Yeah. 21 upgrades in this deck. So being more upgrades than actions and having no actions, which I think we did talk about earlier, meant that like sometimes being able to find other actions and dig to them is important. Now, one of the things that Confidence is, unfortunately, is it's card negative. You play a card to draw 2 and discard 2, so you're using 3 cards to have 2 cards left, right? Or functionally, you're using 3 cards to kind of like stay at your same hand size, but have a better card quality in your hand. Now, Optimus' ability when he arises draws you 2 cards, and Powertrain's Stratagem draws you 2 cards when your opponent arises or combines. So you kind of have a natural flow of cards coming in with those 2 abilities that start in play. Excess card filter out so that your card quality can stay high in your hand. And so that gives confidence kind of an added bonus in terms of its relative relevance. Maybe that's the word for it. Its relevance over the course of a game, because oftentimes this will be a dead card in your deck late if you don't have a natural card advantage engine.
Mm-hmm.
But we have multiple, so that's really good.
Yeah.
Show of Mastery is the card of the event, if you ask me. Every time I played it, yeah. But every time I played it, every time it got played against me, the card was unbelievably impressive. On its face, it's just an orange pump action for 2. I've played it for the no value version of this card a ton of times, very happily, especially if you have multiples in your hand, because I know I have card advantage built into my deck elsewhere. So just having an orange +2 as a static is just a totally serviceable card, especially if you want to kind of commit one card to an attack instead of an upgrade play and an action play. You can kind of do just an action play or just an upgrade play to do so, and Show of Mastery is a really good card to do that with. But like when you have a Legend Mode character and just having that pep talk stapled onto it, the card just enabled you to go, meaningful pump as an action into meaningful pump in a weapon, or meaningful pump as an action into force field, so consistently over the course of the event.
It just keeps you. It just keeps you kind of alive in the game. Like just playing this once just keeps you around for just like even 2-3 turns, like at least.
Right, and Show of Mastery, Power Transgem, and Optimus is Rise ability. All 3 of those are extremely opportunity cost card advantage cards. So what that means is you never have to go off plan to fill your resources, and that's huge. If you have like a critical mass of those kinds of things. So yeah, that's there. And the Autobot ticker's at 13. I think it's only 13 cards total. So as far as Autobot cards go, so move on to the next bit.
Yep.
We'll do the 2-ofs next. There's only 2 2-ofs. We've got Valiant Efforts and Take by Surprise. Yes, these are the cool textless promo Takes by Surprises. They are the ones I played through the event. I do have the ones with the full text, but this is our upgrade removal, something that pairs very nicely with Paralyzo Box, if we ever did draw it. So that was the one instance where Paralyzo Box was really good, was when we had a Take by Surprise to pair with it and guarantee the +4. It's also flexible upgrade removal. It hits armor, utility, or weapon, and that's actually really nice to have as well. And oftentimes you have just kind of throwaway health on your small characters, whether it's a high jump that they didn't kill by 2, or whether it's a tote that they refuse to attack into before you. Or maybe you want to stack the damage on your Optimus so that you can kind of make sure he arises and attacks him on the next turn. That's also a play I did multiple times over the course of the event. Was you actually got benefit out of having the damage dealt to your character there. Also, not scrapping was actually relevant, not because there were any the Jetfire stratagem from ATP 1 wasn't legal. There were no living weapon Megatrons in the event, but it didn't scrap Absorption Core, which meant I still took a damage to my team, but I got to pick where it went instead of my opponent picking where it went, and that was actually relevant.
Interesting. I was gonna ask if Take by Surprises ever felt like mediocre compared to, or almost unnecessary, because like between like Take by Surprise and Ramming Speed, right? Like Take by Surprise does more. Like it's kind of like that up ceiling card between the two, but Ramming Speed is kind of like minimalist like efficiency. Like I've seen a lot of people in T1 especially run Ramming Speed over the Take by Surprise, because oftentimes like the lack of needing to put something on top of the deck isn't worth like dealing that extra damage. Did you ever felt like you wish those were Ramming Speed, or like one of each, with or without the Paralyzo Box in mind?
I think even without Paralyzo Box, I'd still play 2 Take by Surprise and no Ramming Speed, but I think you could totally justify a 1-1 split.
Okay. That's kind of what I was wondering.
At least in that last event. In this upcoming event, and I'm potentially for the foreseeable future, the Jetfire stratagem from ATP 1 is going to be legal, and if that's the case, Ramming Speed is out. And Take by Surprise is a hard yes.
100%.
And then we got Valiant Efforts, which are the best late game pump spell. So that second line of text about you having a range character is always going to be on, because your last character left is almost always Orion Pack / Optimus Prime. and he's ranged in both modes. So that part is great. Additionally, if you play your lineup correctly, your ending team should always be Optimus Prime Powertrain. So you will always have a 3 for a character you want attacking in the late game. There are only 2 in the main deck because you only have 2 leaders, right? And you don't have one of those leaders for the beginning part of the game. But when it is on, it's so good that you just really rather have it. And you don't have a lot of burn in this deck. You're probably noticing so far. You have the ping from Absorption Core and the pings from Valiant Efforts, and that's really it. You're really trying to play pump spells to get your damage in. You're not trying to do. Although I stuff like play Valiant Effort, overwrite Absorption Core, arise your Starscream, swing into overwrite Absorption Core with Spy Satellite uplink, arise your Ghost Starscream, swing into it and kill it. Yeah. I have done that before, and that is a real line of is totally relevant to do.
Yeah.
And if you need to play this as just a zap, you can just play it as just a zap. There's no shame in that. You'll draw more cards later. It's gonna happen. Any questions on the 2 ofs, or they just make sense to you at this point?
I think they make perfect sense. Absolutely. Let's see.
Now we get to the fun ofs.
I was gonna say the 1 ofs I always find the most exciting about any deck profile. I think they often are what really make decks unique.
Yeah. So here is what we got going on. So we've got 1 energy transfer, 1 belligerence, 1 head-on collision, 1 reckless charge. 3 of these are combat-oriented cards, right? We've got belligerence, which is insanely good against blue decks and does turn our couple blues into oranges. Although we're really not playing it for the upside on our side of things. This is a card that is matchup dependent. We've got a lot of card draw and some confidences, right? So we have a lot of to dig card. We should be able to find this at least 1 time against any deck if we really need to. Head-on collision is just a half-decent pump spell, combined with the fact that your smaller characters, before the very, very end game, will almost always be attacking in alt mode. Being a +3 that's static is pretty nice. You want a couple of white pips in the deck. I think we're at 4 or 5. It's not that many, so it's not a big cost there for you. Reckless Charge is specifically against blue decks when you want to attack with Orion packs, and you want him to arise on the next attack. That is what's in the deck for, and occasionally you'll play it as a finishing blow because it's a +4.
I was gonna say, I feel like I saw you play Grenade Launcher Reckless Charge at the end of a game fairly frequently over the course of the tournament.
A lot of cards. When you draw enough cards, you can kind of hold it till the downside's not there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I've only got 2 HP left and my opponent's got 7 attack anyway, I'm not gonna live that next attack. So let's go all the way and see if we're gonna get there.
Absolutely.
I have also Reckless Charged to KO one of my small guys and make my Powertrain a more relevant defender and force my opponent to swing to my Orion packs and arise it. Have 2 relevant characters back and get a full swing out turn. There is some kind of tricksy stuff you can do with it. It's not necessarily all good, but there's some more to it than you might be thinking otherwise. And then Energy Transfer is a card that's just too good not to play all of the legend mode characters.
Sure.
It's worse in a 4-white deck than it is in a 3-white deck. It's just objective. The individual health pools on your characters are just lower than 4-wide. But being able to just move even 3 or 4 damage off of your Orion packs, your Optimus Prime, to one of your small characters is oftentimes enough to buy you a whole extra turn. Yeah. And that is huge. You don't have to do the flashy one where you move all the damage off. Moving 3 or 4 damage is just good enough a lot of the time. Although be wary that if your opponent Snapdragon, this card is going to get boarded out.
I bet you saw that with the Snapdragon this event.
I did. I played against Snapdragon. I actually 2-0'd him. And in game 1, I discarded this to swap for a green. I discarded it to Confidence twice. I drew this card 3 times in that game.
That's unfortunate.
Of course, right? And then head-on collision, by the way, of note. This gets boarded out if you are on the play. I board this out almost every single time.
Sure.
The card that's supposed to be on the draw, because its best is on your turn 1, swinging one of your little guys. That's the best play for it. So.
So real quick in the main deck, I noticed a card that you would think would work very, very well in your deck that's not in there. I see no skillful display, no Autobots, legend specific action pump that also deals 2. Why is that?
We're an orange deck, Christian. We are an orange deck, and that is what we are doing. So there are, I think, a grand total of three black pips in the entire 50, the main deck and the sideboard total.
I see.
And on top of that, we're playing so many orange pip bashes. We're playing a lot of bull. We're playing white pips. But we're an orange deck, so every card that isn't an absolute slam dunk does not get in the deck.
That's fair. I mean,
Noble's
you're already
Blaster as a
on...
one of is just.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're already on 11 pumps if I counted that correctly, which I mean honestly that's huge.
If you're counting belligerence, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's kind of an absurd amount of pumps, all things considering. But it makes up for the couple lower weapon counts, and like you said, just kind of being this 4-wide pure aggressive deck, it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The sideboard character piece I mentioned earlier, one of the things the deck poorly doesn't flip. It also doesn't have a good sideboard. I don't know how to play sideboard character. Registered Captain Impact his strategy of the odds. But I never bought them in, and I didn't know I wanted them. I think there's an argument that maybe on the draw against specifically Fort Max, you might want this, but I think that's really it. I literally can't think of another one.
Sure.
So, yeah, didn't bring this in once. Feel free to experiment with that slot and the side. But I'm saying, but theoretically, I was trying to think through my sideboard plan as a strategic gambit, and I never found a reason to board down to just Orion Pack, Powertrain the Stratagem, and 8-star total. So,
gotcha. Did you regret not?
The sideboard
having,
has some fun ofs.
Did you real quick? Did you regret not having Captain Jetfire from Wave 4 in your sideboard?
Yes, I did, and the reason for that is because Jetfire is my Captain Jetfire holds a special place in my heart. He's my favorite character in the game. He's absolutely unplayable. But that doesn't mean that he's any worse in my eyes.
Beautiful.
I love that card, and I will always love that card. And I've top-8'd several events with him in my sideboard, only to make Dan upset because I never brought it in, and I didn't have a good configuration to bring it in, and I put it there because I didn't know what else to put in that slot.
Amazing.
But yeah, I do regret not having him there.
Okay, that's the important question.
You want to go through the sideboard cards, the actual relevant ones?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to see your sideboard.
We'll go through. I'll go through the ones that are dupes. So these are cards that have copies in the main deck already.
Okay.
So of our 10 sideboard slots, 4 of them are cards that we already have copies of in the main deck. I mentioned Paralyzo Box in the main deck was really bad. I don't feel as bad about the one in the sideboard, is the truth of the matter. I think that maybe this one actually keeps its slot and the one in the main board becomes something different. Because like having this in access to against like other pure orange decks is just so crucial. Having a second belligerence is for obviously blue decks. Tailor your action suite, your pump suite to fit these in a little bit better. If you need more ping, you can bring in the 3rd copy of Valiant Effort here. Valiant Effort's so good that originally the deck was only playing 1, and then it was playing 1 with 2 in the sideboard, and then it was playing 2 with 1 in the sideboard, and there's an argument it should just be 3 in the main board. The card is very, very good.
Yeah.
I could say the same about 4. For that is, so I never forgot to take it out in between games. Because I brought this in a lot. I mentioned tournament was kind of the coming out for Force Field. I brought in the 3rd Force Field a ton, and I was happy to have a lot. That's really the gist of it. The card's just good against the Pierce threshold decks that were swinging for like 7 Pierce 7, 11 Pierce 11 if they really went off. Those are real numbers. I watched them hit in the tournament.
Yeah.
And having this is just frustrates them because they really need both parts of their turn to get up to those numbers. They're not quite like the orange decks, which play a bashing shield, pump action, and get in for lethal damage. That's not something that like orange black decks can really do. They really need to go fusion bore, fight for position, hit you. Like they have to do that. So just taking them off one half of their turn is really huge.
Mm-hmm. What are the other cards in your sideboard?
I brought every card on my sideboard in at some point in this tournament. So we've got 3 more and 3 more upgrades in here.
Mm-hmm.
The lock-on lasers did not come in until the finals when I played against Superion.
Good hindsight to still keep it though.
But I'm happy it was there.
Yep.
Yeah. The Hollow Matters in the sideboard. You know, I mentioned we have critical massive armors in the main deck, and we've got we've got an absorption core going on in there as well. Hollow Matter Projector is a card that you just need. If your opponent is likely to be on mag ray, critical massive, direct damage, you just bring it in. If they're an OA deck, you just bring it in. Bashing Shield is bad, and it's a great easy slot in for that. Sometimes Spy Satellite Uplink is bad, it's an easy slot in there. Lock on Lasers is for combiners. You want this for combiners? If you put face down a Metroplex or a Fort Max, that's great, but that's not why it's there. It's there for combiners. Energy is actually part of a package. Hold the Line, Energy Pack, and Battlefield Scan were a 3-card package I brought in against the Go Starscream decks a lot.
Oh, sure.
And the reason for that is very tailored. So, the truth of the matter is, if I'm gonna bring out Optimus one more time here real quick. I know he's not here. So when Optimus arises, he will have 8 damage on him.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll call it that, right? If we've got 8 damage on us, then Hold the Line is good into the Starscream deck, regardless of who attacks, and it will likely be Starscream who's going to be attacking here.
Yeah.
Because opponents seen us pick up either this Battlefield Scan or they've seen us pick up Spy Satellite Uplink. When he attacks, you will repair 1, go to 7, and no matter what that Pierce number is on your opponent's side of the field, he cannot do more than 8 damage.
Mm-hmm.
8 damage puts you at 15. You will live on 1 and be able to swing back and KO their character.
Correct. Yeah.
It's massively useful against especially the 4-wide Pierce decks, but specifically Starscream for this interaction with Optimus. He's also the only character that can wear Energy Pack, and functionally Energy is just another copy of Hold the Line, but you can only play so many copies of White Pip cards in your deck, and Energy is just a really solid one. I also have brought an Energy Pack against some of the other aggressive decks. Just being able to just put this on Optimus is really frustrating for your opponent. Especially if you get to do an energy transfer into Energy Pack, then you just have like such a healthy character. He's to kill at that point.
Yeah.
And Battlefield Scan is for when your opponent likes to do Brave or Stealth shenanigans. If they're playing point positions, if they're playing Braveries, if they're playing Stealthiness, if they're playing Ghost Starscream, if they're playing Off-Road Patrol, this card is just good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right out there with Spy Satellite Uplink. It doesn't see a lot of mainboard play, but the sideboard play, it's seen a lot more play as well. Oh, you were gonna say?
I was gonna say, Battlefield Scan is the worst of the two. It doesn't stick around, so you don't get multiple uses out of it every time you play it. But having the flexibility to go Battlefield Scan plus Grenade Launcher, or go Spy Satellite Uplink plus like a removal spell or a pump spell, having the ability to use those based on what the context of your hand is really nice. And they're both on greens, so you don't have to play them in large numbers.
Absolutely. So that's I think it's a really cool deck, Richard. I want to ask you one or two questions here. So one thing that I really want to ask is, over the course of the August event, being able to play all 8 of the rounds, was there a deck or decks or plays that really stood out to you that you went up against over the course of the tournament that you may have not seen before, or just really caught your eye that you really think that people who are preparing for September should keep an eye out for in the future?
3 of them.
Okay.
There was a lot of innovation in this month's event, and it was really cool. So first of which, I'm going to shout out my boy Stefan. Stefan was playing a 3-wide blue. It was more mixed. It was a mixed Orion Pax deck. And his deck was really leaning into the Autobot cards thing. He had way more Autobot cards than me. I think he was probably near like 17, where I'm like at 13.
Yeah.
Which, if you see any footage of me playing from the event, you'll see me counting through my scrap before attacks a lot. That's normally to know whether I'm supposed to attack with Pax or Optimus Prime first, knowing there's an Autobot card left in my deck, or whether I'm supposed to attack with Powertrain first to try and reshuffle and hit an Autobot card. That's a lot of what I'm looking for. So I'm counting how many Autobot cards are left in my deck at that point, and something to keep track of if you're going to play the deck, because it affects your attack order.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Stefan was playing 17, and he was playing things like Step Forward, which looked so good. Like, if your opponent didn't have a Spice Lad Uplick in play, or was expecting one of the other myriad of playable secret actions, Step Forward looked incredibly good. The second, I think, that deserves notice was the Ghost Starscream Snapdragon deck that Soviet Bear played. That deck looked terrifying in several of its matchups. You just have a built-in card advantage engine with Scourge. You're a no Autobots team, so you have good access to Magnetic Dysfunction Ray. That's really solid. Snapdragon is just mean.
Yeah,
as well.
He's a character that did see a lot of play in the ATP3 metagame where he came out, but being paired with Ghost Starscream, to kind of piggyback off of what you just said, that tag team is incredibly potent as this blue-black control Pierce list, right? With a big boy Pierce deck, which is kind of weird to think, right? Because even though Snapdragon doesn't get to hit the very high Pierce numbers for Ghost Starscream and Scourge, and Snapdragon with a fusion board for living 2 blacks is still Pierce 5. Right, and just having that control element, he's just so annoying, right? He does, he actively hurts a lot of decks, right? Like I imagine when you played against Snapdragon, those confidences, they were gone. You cannot play confidence against Snapdragon, right? You can't. Okay. He
was so afraid of energy transfer, and he was so afraid of energy transfer and belligerence. Belligerence, energy transfer, and valiant efforts during the course of his game, that he was almost always flipping Scourge and leaving Snapdragon in the T-Rex mode. I think if he'd flipped Snapdragon to the other mode, I would have had a much harder time with the matchup. Where I think Snapdragon was really better on his front mode the majority of the tournament.
Yeah.
But I think if he flipped Snapdragon to the back mode, I would have had a much tougher time actually just developing my game plan. Although I did kill Snapdragon first in both of our games.
Interesting.
So, it's tempting to kill Scourge because he's so fragile, but you just have to kill Snapdragon. He's just the problem.
Yeah,
so.
Scourge is good. He adds value to the team, but I mean, over the whole grand scheme of things, you just don't want to invest resources into him. He doesn't do it that much. He's not doing that much to the team.
Black deck, Scourge just is a card that draws you cards. That's literally all he does.
Yeah. And flip occasional.
And that's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good, but it's not the thing you need to be scared of, right? If you can KO the character with a pocket processor on it, that's great. But oftentimes it behooves you to kill the other character.
Yep.
So.
True.
And Starscream was one of the cards that I actually I teched my sideboard around, and that was one of the characters that. So I mentioned I attacked first with 3 different characters in my lineup over the course of the tournament. If my opponent led Stars, I attacked Tote with no pumps every single time.
Sure.
And the reason for that was Tote was my worst attack, is bar none my worst attack, and number 2, I never wanted to spend a base 5 attack into Starscream.
Yeah.
So even though I wanted Pax to die, you to rise, I was never attacking him and just to avoid it.
Well, that also brings up a point of why the legend characters are so unique too, right? Because there's times where it's awesome just to look at them as just like better battle masters, where you just always send the battle masters. You always send Fire Drive out first. You always send Aimless out first. But like, sometimes you just don't want to send them out first. Sometimes you want the late game Arise. Sometimes you want like the last character to be the bot mode before he arises. So then you were forced to have to deal with it with a singular character, and that can be a huge strategy. I've seen people win and lose games after that.
Especially because the deck has so much natural card advantage in it, that you can play the grindy game, right? If you swing with Toad and your opponent has to spend 1 card and an attack to KO Toad, and if you swing with High Jump and your opponent has to spend 1 card and an attack to KO High Jump, both of your other characters are such, like, just of beef. It's quite hard for your opponent to get any more KOs in one shot, where you are now powered up to get KOs in one shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
You there, Christian?
Yeah, I'm there. Sorry. Let's cut that out. Yeah. And another point, just to briefly talk about Legends real quick before we end it off here. Another really cool thing about Legend mode characters that your team actually doesn't exemplify at all. But it's cool that it still has this flexibility, right? Like, in my opinion, the best part of Legend mode characters is that you have to approach deck building and team building when playing one so differently, right? Like, how many times in the Transformers TCG from sets 1 through freaking even ATP 3, 1 to ATP 3, where the deck, like the character lineups looked like one of two usually. You either had a bunch of characters that you just wanted to get to their mode to attack in, and that was it. They didn't flip anymore. Or you had you had 3 characters, 3 to 4. One flipped once, and then the other one, there's one other that keeps flipping for the rest of the game, and it's usually a middle to high star character. How often have we had 5, 6, 7 drop characters that were super flip intensive that never saw play because they just had no room for the flips, right? Because your main star character has to flip. That's the beauty about the Legend mode characters, that they are the main star character, and they flip, like they get to the mode they want to be in over the course of the game naturally, which gives you room to play these small characters that are flip intensive. The Huffers, I've seen people play Sergeant Mirage, and I've seen really cool success with it. You know, Chrome Dome as a middle, like, second tier character in the lineup. A lot of really cool innovation in team building, just because of that. And even though your deck doesn't exemplify that, I appreciate the fact that that's not the only strategy that you have to do for the Legend, that you can do with the Legends, right? You can play them in a non-flip intensive team where you aren't flipping anybody, and I appreciate that flexibility.
Well, there's a different incentive going on in my deck building things, right? I have decided that the power level of the characters on their face is so much, I'm willing to give up a third of my turn every turn.
Yeah.
That's big game. That is a lot to give up.
It is. I mean, there's very few decks we've seen that like don't flip anybody that do well. Like, honestly, I can barely think of any that have no flipping and actually like are top performing decks at all in the game.
I mean, like, the flip is a really powerful part of things, right? The Perceptors of the world will tell you that, like, having access to as many flips as possible is what you really want to be doing. But my deck is trying to end the game as fast as possible. If it's not going to end the game, I'm going to play action upgrade, action upgrade, action upgrade every single turn for the first 9 turns of the game.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's what I'm trying to do, right? So either try to counteract what I'm doing, you can try to compete with me on that axis, which you're going to have a really hard time to doing, or you can just try to play not my game.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, Wyatt, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about your deck. Congratulations for reaching 2nd place. It's a huge achievement in my opinion. It always is. There's a lot of stiff competition out there in these tournaments. And I think you rocked it with your deck. I think the deck is such an excellent choice. I think it does a lot of really cool things that we don't see in the game. And I would not be surprised to see this deck again in future tournaments, either by you or from someone else.
It's also really fun. It's a fun deck.
It's
what
fun.
I like to call it. So one of the things I like liked about Cars back in Wave 3 was I thought it to be a thinking man's aggro deck.
Mm-hmm.
I like to call it. I think in Wave 4 there was one of those with the Springer aggro deck with Fire Drive that you played. I think that there has not really been one in a while, but I think this is a thinking man's aggro deck, and I really like that your attack order matters based on your matchup. You have like these confidence decisions that are really key. Knowing when to attack with Optimus Prime because there may or may not be Autobot cards in the deck. I think all those are a huge game, and you can utilize your skill in a way that like garners you edge playing this deck. So
Absolutely. I agree tenfold. Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Give some love to Richard in the comment section. Let us know what you would change to the deck if you were to run it. And have yourselves a great day. Adios, everybody.
see y'all.